If Baylor wants to turn their fortunes around under Dave Aranda, perhaps the best place to look is right across the field on Saturday and see what Kalani Sitake has done with these 2024 BYU Cougars. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. We appreciate those who make it your first listen today and every day. To all you everydayers, we salute you as the Baylor Bears are just a day away from taking the field against the BYU Cougars, a friendly fracas renewed. They last played at McLean Stadium in 2021, a really fun, exciting game with a ton of BYU fans there. Bears win that one 38-24, and then nothing short of a classic in 2022, the double overtime victory for the Cougars. And both teams went kind of downhill after that, and both struggled to get to that 6-win total and get to bowl games in that 2022. But what an unbelievable game that was. Ahead of this game, we are talking about the quarterback situation and why it might be a little bit more close than you might think in Jake Retzlaff and Sawyer Robertson. Plus, we're going to go into a discussion that we had on the Matt Mosley Show with Kalani Sitake of BYU and talk about his relationship with Dave Aranda and a really interesting comparison that he had for Coach Aranda to a BYU legend, and who Sitake is looking at on that Baylor defense that might give the Cougars some fits. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But of course, you guys know me. I'm not all that bright. I can't get down in the X's and O's, right? I hear that a lot. So let's just stick with the quarterback. That's an easy one to look at. And Jake Retzlaff has had an up and down career at BYU. We talked with Jake Hatch about it yesterday, but he kind of had some moments towards the end of last season. BYU does not get to bowl eligibility. That heartbreaking loss at Oklahoma State, which was really taking one for the team for the rest of the Hateful Eight so that it wouldn't be OU-UT in the Big 12 championship. So we appreciated that. But he had some of his moments then. He had a tough start to this season and had a real good game against Kansas State that really got people all on his side again. He had the t-shirt after the game that says BYU, which I think is just hilarious. But it was something of a comeback game for him, and one that was kind of a weird game in terms of how the scoring broke down, but obviously a lopsided lopsided BYU victory at 38-9. He went 15-21, only threw for 150, but a couple of touchdowns, only took 2 sacks, which I know has been a problem for him, specifically last year. And so it's like all is well in Cougarland with Jake Retzlaff. And now it looks like Jake Retzlaff and the Cougars have the edge in that department at quarterback. You look at the numbers on the year and you're like, man, this is all right. This is the Jake that we wanted to see. 3-to-1 touchdown to pick ratio. That'll probably get better. He's thrown for almost 1,000 yards in 4 games, 9 TDs, 3 picks. He gets the car in the garage, which has been kind of an issue for BYU, or was an issue in parts of last year. Now they seem to have a confident, capable, calm quarterback under center or in the shotgun. And that last part there of describing Jake Retzlaff sounds a lot like how us Baylor people would describe Sawyer Robertson. So here Jake Retzlaff is getting a lot of the plaudits after a big win last week. And look, he deserves it, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, I see a lot of the traits for Retzlaff as I do with Sawyer Robertson. And Kalani Sitake in the press conference last week used the term game manager for Retzlaff. And like, again, people think of this as like a negative connotation. It's really not, especially at the college game, and especially one where they've struggled to have healthy, consistent quarterback play the last few years, and the last 2 seasons anyway. And since that last Baylor matchup in September of 22, where you're the Bears, you're looking for the same thing. I think you've been disappointed at the quarterback position the last few years under Blake Shapen. It was a weird first 2 games with DeQuan Finn. There was almost as much bad as good, even in a 45-3 win against Tarleton, then the loss against Utah. And the best thing you could say about Sawyer Robertson since then, he has been cool. He has been calm. He's been collected. He's not being shooketh in the pocket. And he has looked a more confident quarterback than last year. I think that's fair to say. So I went through Retzlaff's numbers in the lopsided win against Kansas State. Sawyer Robertson doesn't complete as much of the pass, 11-21, but throws for 148, throws 2 touchdowns, only takes 1 sack, QBR just under 90. Like, okay, we're looking at pretty similar quarterbacks here. And through just 2 starts, Robertson has thrown for 463 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And again, both have looked cool customers, game managers. And when Baylor needed to take the shots down the field, or when those shots were open anyway, Sawyer Robertson was not missing them. So I use that as a positive for Baylor fans. You know, I'm not saying Jake Retzlaff is setting the world on fire, but you knew his name coming into this week because there's been plenty of positive buzz around him for a 4-0 BYU team. I think these teams are constructed pretty similarly. Both have struggled to establish the run. They can make some plays in the passing game, but don't have like elite receiving cores. And both have good defenses who, but for 2 plays in that Colorado game, are not giving up big explosive plays. And the model quarterback that you want back there is a guy who completes a lot of his passes, doesn't put the ball in harm's way, and is a cool customer and can do something with their legs. Sawyer Robertson and Jake Retzlaff, I think, are a lot closer than people think. And it wouldn't surprise me by the end of this season if the per game numbers favored a guy like Sawyer Robertson. I think they're still trying to figure out what this offense looks like when they're taking shots. Because, we heard 25 shots down the field last week, and we didn't see that, but they weren't unsuccessful when they took those shots. And I think that says good things about Sawyer. First off, that he's not throwing the ball in harm's way, right? They didn't take as many shots because I don't think the looks were there. So second off is that he completed the ones that they had the good looks. He had a couple big time, touchdown throws of 25 plus yards. Like those are taking shots downfield. And he even had a couple of great ones along the sideline, including that unreal Katron Jackson catch that kind of got lost in the fold of such a exciting game and one that came down to the final few plays. So again, the term game manager is not a negative term. And I think that's what you've got in this game. And that's why it's going to be such a defensive struggle. We talked about that on the crossover yesterday, and it will come up again later in this show. We'll hear from Kalani Sitake about it. But there is a certain philosophy amongst both these head coaches in certainly a way around the way they run their programs. And this is a long-standing relationship between Kalani Sitake and Dave Aranda. So I want to hear from the BYU head coach and hear what he had to say about that relationship and comparing our man Dave Aranda to a true BYU legend. That's coming up. But first, this episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up all the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved only for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms to apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. One more time, you could sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. I said earlier this year when Baylor was taking on Utah, if you're looking for like a long-term best case scenario for what this Dave Aranda era could be at Baylor, the long-term best case scenario would be Kyle Whittingham and what he has built at Utah to the point where he's won conference championships in 2 different conferences already, and his hightailing his way towards a third different conference. There's only one FBS coach in history who has done that, won the conference in 3 different conferences at the same school. That is a guy best known for his consulting time with the Baylor Bears, Gary Patterson. Kyle Whittingham is on track to do that at Utah. And so you look at his record down 20 years, it's been pretty fantastic at a program that was worried they were going to take a big step back when Urban Meyer left for Florida. Instead, Kyle Whittingham takes them to heights that they really haven't seen in their history. And if you're looking at the short term, okay, Cam, we can't look 20 years down the line and have some, dynasty like Utah. If you're looking in the short term and what that could look like and how to turn this thing around, what kind of coach can I look towards then? Well, if you're Dave Aranda on the sideline tomorrow, you can look right across and you'll meet him at the 50 before the game, because Kalani Sitake is the man that you've got to look at in terms of how to bring your program back and bring it back quick. Because you look at Sitake's years at BYU, none of them have been disastrous. He's had 2 losing seasons in 8 full seasons here. He took over for Bronco Mendenhall, which is kind of a weird exit. BYU felt like they were in limbo, to use a Catholic term. They were in limbo for a while. They had, I think it was 3 or 4 straight 8-5 seasons. They end with a 9-4, and then Sitake takes over in 2016, and with Broncos players, he goes 9-4 again, and then it flips to 4-9 in 2017. And now BYU fans are wondering, like, is this the guy? Can he pick up the pieces here? And then he starts to build this program back up. 7-6, 7-6, 11-1, 10-3. And they go 5-7 last year. And you look, before we're even at the end of September, they're 4-0 and they're back in the rankings. And it's like, this guy knows how to pick up the pieces after a bad year. It doesn't happen often. In 8 seasons, they've gone to 6 bowl games, but he can flip it around right away. And we talked about that a couple of times this offseason, and we talked about it yesterday with Jake, in that it's not an easy thing to do. I think there are some Baylor fans that need to curb expectations a little bit. I think expecting 6 wins to keep the coach's job alive here is not crazy. But I think there are still some Baylor fans out there that are thinking this team should be winning 8-9 games the way we used to 10 years ago. It's really tough to build back to that. Really tough to build back to that, especially on a consistent basis. First year in the Big 12, they take their lumps at BYU and they lose some close games and they don't win a Big 12 game on the road. They still haven't done that. But you look again, end of September, they have some nice Power 4 wins on the schedule. They have a Big 12 win over a team that could compete for this conference championship. They kick the crud out of them. They beat an ACC team in SMU on the road, and they're 4-0. So whatever Kalani Sitake is doing on the other side, that's what you need to look at, because he's had 1 losing season before this one, because this one's, not complete. So let's say this. Kalani has had 2 losing seasons at BYU. 1 he turned into a bowl game the next year, and 1 he is just 2 wins away from turning into a bowl game. We're not through the end of September. That's what you got to look at. That's how you don't sustain mediocrity, is whatever Kalani Sitake is doing over there. And what I think is really fascinating is Sitake has known Dave Aranda for years. And he goes back to, the days where they were both assistants at low-level colleges, and they would just talk ball with each other. They would go visit each other, see how they ran practices, see how they game planned, and just a ton of respect there. And we interviewed Sitake on the Matt Mosley Show, and Matt brings up a good point of like, hey, you guys, you talk really glowingly about Dave Aranda. You talk about the friendship that you guys have, not just a professional friendship, but a real friendship. And yet you present yourself on the sideline 2 very different ways, right? Dave Aranda, calm, demure on the sideline, very methodical in the way he approaches things. Kalani Sitake, man, demonstrative, emotional in a different way. We saw it that game in 2021 here at McLean Stadium. They had that 4th and 2 quarterback keeper for a touchdown for like 45 yards. And Sitake is like beat red, fired up, yelling. And so Mosley asked him this question, and Sitake has a really interesting comparison. He compares Dave Aranda to the best coach in BYU's history.
Well, I think when I made a statement back when I got the job here at BYU, and LaVell Edwards, who is my mentor, reason why I wanted to be a head coach, it was my coach when I played here at BYU, and I said I wanted to be the Polynesian LaVell Edwards, and he called me. I was fortunate to be the head coach for my first year. Was his last year on earth, and he called me, and I took the phone call, and LaVell said, "Don't say that anymore." And he said, "I just want you to be yourself." He's like, "Kalani, you can't be another version of me." And I know what he was getting at. I think he knew that I was joking, but kind of not, because I wanted to be like him, But he was right. You just got to be yourself, and I think Dave's going to be himself. That's his personality is his own personality. When you took a picture of LaVell Edwards on the sideline, you couldn't tell if we were up by 50 or down by 50. That's just how his presence, but I think he complemented what he needed with his coaching staff. I think Dave's done the same thing. That's why I like being his friend.
All right. Boy, LaVell Edwards, what a legend. And he and Grant Taft were a lot alike, in their demeanors, their approaches, their faith, all of that. And you're right. Nobody. And actually,
yeah. Dave's probably more the same personality as LaVell, even. So that's right. I mean, I think we've got to be ourselves, and we've got to be comfortable. I think sometimes in the coaching world, the business world, the professional world, people they think you should be a certain way, and I think you could be what God put you here to be, and that's the best version of yourself.
Boy, what an interesting comparison. I did not see that one coming. But what an awesome story about, him taking over the job and LaVell Edwards saying, "You got to be you." And in a way, that's Sitake saying it about Dave Aranda. You got to be you. No matter what it is, you got to go out there and be yourself. And he says, actually, Aranda has more LaVell Edwards in terms of that demonstration than Sitake has with LaVell Edwards. You wouldn't know if they were up 50 or down 50. And I think you can take that for the same way as Dave Aranda. And I think that ticks a lot of people off a lot of the time. I've been on here saying, I don't really care if he's, doing the ferocious butt slaps or yelling and screaming on the sideline versus what he actually is doing and, just being calm, diminutive. To me, that doesn't really matter. If you're winning and he's drawing up a great game plan, I don't really care how he acts on the sidelines. I know that matters to a lot of people, but I mean, there are plenty of coaches that you can look at who didn't get severely fired up on the sideline, who became very successful. Guys like LaVell Edwards. And I can't have more respect for the way this BYU football program runs itself. And I think it's a blueprint for Baylor either way, right? Like, I mean, BYU obviously different in terms of it's a little bit bigger and has a, national fan base, but it's a faith-based institution. They have been at the bottom of the barrel before. They've had recent success in the last decade and a half as well. Obviously some decades before too, don't get me wrong, but they know the uphill battle of recruiting as a faith-based institution. They know that for years conferences didn't really want them because of that faith base. And I'm specifically looking at the Pac-12. And we know that would be the case for Baylor as well. And yet they are consistently a force to be reckoned with in football. And they are able to recruit around that and recruit based off, faith and a program and relationships. And they've done that forever, whether it was LaVell Edwards or Bronco Mendenhall or Kalani Sitake. That's the blueprint that Baylor needs to be looking at. And Baylor has a much better talent pool to pick from its recruiting backyard. I can't say enough about BYU in terms of that portion of it, how they run their program, and that Baylor should be looking at it the same way. And I know that Dave Aranda is trying to do a lot of the same things as Kalani Sitake in the background, but they win more. BYU wins more. And so if you want to look at the long term, what the best case would be it's probably someone like Kyle Whittingham at Utah. But if you're looking at the short term and how to turn this thing around quickly, just do whatever Kalani Sitake's doing. Because they came in with a bunch of question marks this year. They were picked to finish behind Baylor in the preseason Big 12 poll. They didn't know what they had at quarterback. A lot of fans didn't like what they had at quarterback last year. They're 4-0. It's working. That's who you need to look to. That other side of the field, that other sideline. Kalani Sitake is the guy. And yet he is deflecting praise onto Dave Aranda and the way he carries himself and the respect that he has for this program. Sitake also has a ton of respect for this Baylor defense. We'll get to the answer of who he is most excited to see, I guess we'll put it that way. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But let's hear from our friends at FanDuel, because you NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you're going to check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Let me say that again. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I think most of us this year have been impressed with Baylor's defense, one way or the other. Obviously, it was lights out the first 3 games. They didn't allow a second half point the first 3 games. They looked good against Utah, and they really beat up against some lower competition like Tarleton and Air Force. And then, again, I've said it all week, but there's a lot of positives to take from the defensive effort in that Colorado game. Did they make enough plays? No. And that's what it comes down to. No, they didn't make enough plays to win the game because they lost the game. And they let them back in the game on defense. So still, a lot of positives to take. The 8 sacks, which we all know could have been a lot more. They looked like a fast, physical defense, which they did not look like last year. They didn't look like it the year before. We haven't seen fast and physical like this since 2021. Hold your horses, Cam. I'm not saying they're 2021. But you've had some lean defenses the last 2 years that have left something to be desired. This group has the opportunity to get back to that hard-nosed, physical, fast, pass-rushing kind of a defense. And hopefully the turnovers will come with it because they haven't forced many of those. But let's call this what it is. You face a Colorado team that I wouldn't say is at the top of the conference, but have 2 of the best skill position players in the Big 12. BYU, while a more efficient team all the way around, does not have the weapons that Colorado had. And so my good pal, Matt Mosley, asked Kalani Sitake about the defensive effort of it all. What does he see from Baylor's defense?
What stood out to you the most when you were watching that film of the Colorado game?
Yeah, the athleticism, the speed, and the skill set that they have. It's quite unique, and when they put it all together, it's dangerous. And so we recognize that, but they've been that consistently in terms of personnel and on their team. But you could see that they're fundamentally a lot more sound right now, and I think that's a huge compliment to Coach Aranda himself. But you can see that the personality and the identity on that defense emerged in that game. You could tell that they're a relentless group. So this is a tough task. I mean, we're not thinking that this is going to go in there and just it's going to work easy. We're expecting it to be some tough sledding. We've just got to stick with it, just like they did against Colorado. And but you look at the relentless pursuit. That's why they're able to make such big plays. But they also left some plays out there that they can make. So a very dangerous group, and we're looking forward to the matchup. It's a good test to see what we can do, especially on the road.
I said the quarterbacks were similar in this matchup. I think the defenses are really similar too. Different outcomes on Saturday. Let's say that. One team holds 1-9, one gives up 38. One team wins, the other loses. One team forces turnovers, the other doesn't. But at its core, these two teams like to play defense the same way. That's quick around the edge. That's physical at all three levels, like most teams would like to do. And they don't give up big plays. And that's why it's going to feel like at times, I think in this game tomorrow, that these two teams are looking in the mirror. Two game manager quarterbacks who aren't necessarily going to win games on their arm talent, going up against two defenses who like to keep things in front of them. They don't give up explosive plays. I understand the irony of keeping it in front of you when we talked about that Hail Mary all week. But two teams that are going to make you go down the field on you. If you're going to score, it's going to take 10 plays. That's the start of getting back to that Jackers and Robbers best defense in the Big 12 kind of defense that Baylor had in 2021. Because first, you got to stop giving up the explosive plays. BYU has learned that very quickly, and I think that's why they're 4-0. Baylor is learning that slowly but surely, and that's why they're 2-2. I still don't understand why Baylor's the favorites, but one of the things that we can hang our hat on is that the sun will be out, and I think we mentioned this yesterday too, but BYU 2-12 in their last 14 day games against FBS teams. The Cougs like playing at night, man. They really love playing at night, and they really, really love playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium. They don't have either of those things on their side in this game tomorrow, and I can't wait for it. It's going to be a great crowd there. Obviously, plenty of BYU people. And obviously, a special thank you to their Alumni Association as well. For those of you who are interested, they are doing a food drive at University High School here in Waco, 8 to 10 a.m. tomorrow, where you can donate canned goods, non-perishables, to serve Shepherd's Heart, which is the largest food pantry here in Central Texas. It's almost like these are great people, no matter what their religion is, because they are helping out the communities that they're visiting, and they are helping out our Waco community big time. And Shepherd's Heart does a ton of great work here in the community for those who really, really need it. So yes, I will say thank you. Thank you to the BYU people who are helping out with that. And it is open. They'll have breakfast tacos there. We interviewed them on the radio the other day. So you as a Baylor fan can get down there as well. Do your part. These are two institutions that are very similar, faith-based, a lot about service. And I think we can find there's not a lot of differences between these two. But of course, we want the Bears to go and beat the crud out of them if they can tomorrow. Let me know what your score prediction is. Drop that down in the comments below. Is BYU going to waltz out of Waco undefeated at 5-0 and ascending in the rankings? Or is Baylor going to get that first signature win of the season? Is that going to be the statement game that they thought they had with Utah, that they thought they had with Colorado? Is that going to come through against the Cougars tomorrow? Drop that down in the comments below. Give a score prediction. Let me know what you think is going to be the difference in this game. Drop that down in the comments below as well. Be sure to like and subscribe. Get involved in the comment section. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping videos on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The only free and daily Baylor podcast that is exclusively Baylor, not coming from the university. You've got it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. We will see you back here tomorrow afternoon with a very, very tired Cam Stewart, because I got a 7 a.m. kickoff show. Listen to that on ESPN Central Texas on your way to the game from 7 to 9. And I will be back here in the afternoon for the #1 Baylor football postgame. That's Locked On Baylor.